Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you for having us. This is wonderful, and you just asked me how I experienced this NOAH. I think it was a really nice NOAH in terms of meeting people again physically, but also having the chance to learn new things about especially sustainable topics. You had fantastic speaker here. Thank you so much. Really wonderful. And here we have the chance now to have a little chat with Raffael Wohlgensinger, CEO and founder of Formo, one of our portfolio companies. Before I come to that, maybe a quick few introduction to Grazia for those who don't know Grazia Equity. We have actually been investing in the startup scene for more than 20 years. And as an evergreen fund, we have been quite flexible as to what we did. And one of the special, I think, things we have had is we had the pleasure to invest very early on in sustainable projects. So we started to invest at the end of the 90s in renewable energies. We helped to build the pioneer in solar electricity, a company called Conergy, which we then took public, and continued to invest in different kind of sustainable topics, such as lightweight materials with a company called FACT, which was back then really bringing down prices to make them competitive in the market, helping the car industry to reduce their weight. Very important, but we also invested, for example, in immuno-oncology. Last year we took one of our portfolio companies public. It's a company called iMedix. And then you have also maybe seen here two other of our portfolio companies in the sustainable space. Jennifer was here on stage before, virtually, with Kitty, Conscious Beauty. And then you heard probably Axel Schmiegelow from iTravel, sustainable travel. I just can recommend you to book on iTravel in the future. This is wonderful. And here we have now Formo, which we invested in 2 years ago because we thought it was such an exciting story and something that really would make a huge impact to our world in the future. So let me go into the discussion with Rafa. Rafa, maybe we start a little bit and you give us a quick idea about what Formo is for and why in the first place did you found Formo?
Yeah, first of all, maybe also very quickly, Marco, thanks so much for this wonderful event and the whole team. And Alec, obviously, a pleasure to be on stage with you and have the Grazia team here as well. It's really amazing. It's kind of, I think you could say, my hometown, although for Swiss people it's not really, so it's super cool to be here. And this is where the story starts. I'm Swiss, big cheese and dairy lover, obviously, but since 7 years on a plant-based diet, and for ethical reasons in the first place, I guess, but then more and more obviously also for sustainability reasons, and was just always super dissatisfied with the pure plant-based options that we see in the market, and was convinced that we need, you know, a big disruptive change in the food system because all of the problems that we see, you know, specifically in animal mass factory farming, and being very, you know, interested in biology my whole life, I figured that Mother Nature's way of doing things is the best way to solve these problems, which is why I started Formo, where we produce real cheese, real European cheese, without the cow through fermentation.
Wonderful. I mean, yesterday we heard of several companies being in the meat space, right? One company also being in the dairy space. And we heard, I think, a lot of figures about the potential impact that can create. And I think we could really well see that with most of these projects, we are speaking about a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions of more than 90%, and this is really, really big, besides all the other positive aspects and effects that has on the health of human being, on the health of course, the cows, and the reduction of antibiotics, for example, which really makes up about 80% of all antibiotic use. So this is a lot, and it's fantastic. It was also driving us to consider investing in the first place in Formo. So Rafa, this year you announced with $50 million, the biggest A round of any European food tech startup. And considering the fact that you are still developing your technology and product, one can ask legitimately, I mean, an A round with 50 million still in the development phase, isn't that a little bit of a hype we are seeing here? And also some other companies have been gotten a lot of money at very high valuations in early stages in that space. So how do you see it? How is that justified in your opinion?
I mean, it's definitely a reflection of technology leadership in the space. It's a reflection of the fact that the technology that we are working on and many other companies are working on, not only in dairy, but also obviously materials and meat, have the potential to really disrupt markets, you know, beyond $1 trillion. Food and ag is the biggest industry in the world. And for example, you know, dairy being close to $1 trillion, meat being $1 trillion, like if you have companies that go after, you know, really the disruption of the production of these things with the potential to really, you know, make obsolete some of the biggest companies we see around today, then I actually think it's just a representation of that, if at all, if you compare it with other industry, whether it's transportation or fintech, and you compare funding levels, I would say on a systemic level, probably even underfunded the whole space. Now, excluding maybe some of the quick commerce companies that I don't count to like disruption of the production itself, but companies that really kind of change the game in food and ag, I think, you know, have such an immense potential that it's definitely justified in the end.
I think also when looking at, especially comparing the amount of money that's flowing into like food delivery, for example, right, in the last few years, which was a manifold of that which was flowing into food tech, we see that there is still, as you say, like a huge gap to close, and I'm pretty sure also I think that this will reverse in the next several years.
And it's also not, I mean, in the end, like it's not maybe traditionally food tech, right, has been something completely different. Now, what we're talking about in cell-based, in precision fermentation, this is biotech, deep tech revolution, right? Which is obviously also has much more potential, but it's also much more capital intensive than, let's say, you know, putting in place a new transparent brand or just doing value chain optimization, right? So it's a whole new level of disruption that comes with just much more potential at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So looking ahead, Rafa, maybe you tell us what exactly your vision is for the future with Formo, with the company.
Yeah, so two things I would say. I mean, one is as a purpose why we exist, or what we always kind of what is ingrained in our DNA is that we want to create a better world through sustainable food. And we've tried to kind of quantify that in a big hairy goal that we would call our vision, and that is to replace 10% of Europe's dairy by 2030, which is obviously, the people who know the space, a very big hairy goal. But I think definitely doable, because if we look into how fast the technology is improving, you know, big change is coming, and I think having such a big vision that obviously then also translate into, as what you have been saying, like, you know, cutting down emissions, biodiversity gains, getting away from all the things that we find in food today, whether it's, you know, all of the antibiotics or the hormones and all of those things, obviously having impact not only on you know, environmental sustainability, but health and ethical. That's just a reflection of that big dream.
Wonderful. That's a great dream, I think, to follow on and to realize when you go about achieving your goals. I mean, you always have to also move between the competition, right? And as you know, there are some other companies out there who have also started to engage in that journey. Some are progressed and have gotten also a lot of money, especially in the USA. So where do you see your advantages or USPs, or how do you want to really stay on top of the competition in the future?
Yeah, one thing that we have been doing differently from anybody else in the space, I think, really is very much connected to the European heritage, which for us really, I mean, dairy innovation, specifically in cheese, if you think about all the great products, whether that's a Manchego, whether that's a burrata, mozzarella, Gruyere, Roquefort, like all of these great products, they come from Europe. And for us, what was really important to focus a lot on the product and not only, let's say, the ingredient. So kind of combining the bio and the food, which is reflected in our passion of the cheese specifically, and thus also translating that into a business model that is much more B2C than some of the other competitors who go more B2B. Because for us, it's super important to really lead the narrative shift as well, and we want to be there when the product gets to market, because we feel like this is such an important technology, because food is at the core of society, right? And when we do consumer interviews, specifically in Europe, we hear all the concerns that, you know, oh, what is this technology about? And for us, it's just super important to be there when the products get to market. So very much focusing on a B2C approach and focusing on the product a lot.
Okay, so there's a long way to go. I mean, you're still developing, then you want to be with the end customers, like building a brand. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your go-to-market strategy, and also give us some idea about when do you want to enter the market, where do you do it, where do you go to first?
Yeah. Great question. So, want to go to market in 2023, and I think there's different models, and also, you know, you can look into adjacent fields and also other technology product, how those have been introduced to the market. I think in this case also, based on the data that we have from consumers following a skimming pricing strategy. So early on, when supply is the bottleneck and not demand, and you basically speak to early adopters, then there will be a price premium for the products, and mostly introducing those through gastro and selected partners, I guess. So not going straight to like either D2C or the retail, but really kind of creating that excitement of the brand and the product with selected partners before we then really go retail at the end of the day.
In terms of the geographies, I mean, how do you see the regulation? We have like Europe, we have the USA, we have Asia, right? All big markets for you to address in the future, making a huge impact everywhere, basically. So I guess this, when you look at the market, you look at market sizes, you look at potential customer acceptance and so forth, right? But on the other side, you have these different kind of regulations. So what does this basically have as a consequence for you in terms of the decision where to go first, and how do you see it politically?
Yeah, it's kind of two different things, right? I mean, on one side, you have the regulation that basically limits your market entry, and based upon that, we choose our fastest way to market. And I think everybody in the space who's familiar with the regulations in different geographies knows. I mean, you have, you know, countries like Singapore is super fast. You have a bunch of geographies behind. US is much faster than Europe, for example. So we're speaking somewhere between 3 to 12 months, whereas Europe, the EFSA approval novel food takes you 18 months best case, right? So obviously it takes you much longer to get to market in Europe. And interestingly enough, if you look into consumer data, that is not reflected there, because the European consumers are as excited, if not even more excited about these products, but they're living in a jurisdiction where obviously just those products will get to market, you know, later. So for us as a company who needs validation in the market, we will go to markets where we can do so fast, right?
And I mean, it's not only important for the customers, right, and for you as a company, but also for the economy as a whole, for the startup ecosystem. I mean, now again, we see, for example, when we compare the figures of startups in the USA, in the food tech space, to the ones in Europe, we see that there is already, like, or at least as of today, there's quite a lead in terms of the number of money going into that space, and also the amount of companies that we see in the USA versus Europe. So the question is a little bit to the European politicians, what do they want to do, and what would you suggest in terms of regulation? Do you think the EU should loosen regulation in order to to facilitate, in order to really help companies being built and being speeding up their own go-to-market in Europe? Or do you think, no, it can be done differently, for example, by accelerating approval processes without really having to lose those regulations?
I wouldn't say they should loosen, because I'm much in favor of product safety and thus also consumer safety. I would just say speed it up. Make it as safe as you have it right now, but speed it up,
but
right?
Speed it up.
Speed it up. I mean, regulation is obviously a point where the EU is kind of behind some of the other markets. The beauty that we see in Europe, which is why we are here, is this long heritage of artisanal cheese making, of the craftsmanship in the product, the players we can work together with, some of the best universities, institutes, and producers that we can team up with. Because at the end of the day, yes, the bio platform is science, but the product is an art, right? To produce a good product, that is an art. It's not just having a good ingredient. The process to get to a great product is also very difficult. And obviously, engineering talent in Europe is really, really strong. You have that you have the amazing infrastructure, and also now funding levels are going up. So I think there's a lot to gain to being based in Europe.
And by the way, also not only regulation, but when you look also to the USA, there was a lot of public money going, like from the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, the Science, Natural Science Foundation, even the NASA invested in food tech startups. And I think here in Europe, there has not been such a big public, not even like, financial support on the public side. So probably we should really also ask politicians to think more about how can we really speed up the whole process, because it's so important for, again, not only for human mankind, but also for a potentially very big new industry in Europe, right?
At the end of the day, for me also, it's also a geopolitical issue, right? Food production is the core of a society, and I think the last thing the EU wants is to become dependent on other countries when it comes to food production, because for the first time in food and agriculture, this is very much tech-driven, right? And so if a superior technology is being developed, and as a European Union, you don't have your own players, you have a problem.
So yeah, and that leads us a little bit maybe to the last question. I would say, like, when you beam yourself into the future and you think about like who will win the game again, yeah? So how do you see the end game evolving? I mean, what is really important to win this game from a competitive point of view?
Yeah, I think two things. One is, in the first place, being able to translate the science into products fast. So you have to make it tangible fast. You need to get to market, you need to show it to people, you need to have a strong voice and be the thought leader in the space. And also, I think, specifically in Europe, I see that very, very much so. You need to educate consumers, right? You need to be transparent, you need to show them what this is all about. This is one thing, so kind of you need to be present and visible and top of mind. And then at the end of the day, really end game, I think the companies who are able to constantly innovate in the space, in the long run will outcompete all the others, because we're just at the start of this whole innovation. We're working with technologies that are that have originated in pharma applications and classic biotech mostly, where we talk about small volume, high margin compounds. Now bulk food production is a completely different game. So a lot of innovation potential to make products better, healthier, more cost efficient. Even optimize ecological effects even more, right? And the companies who will be at the forefront of that innovation will win in the long run.
Especially with you being on the B2C side, I think there's also downstream in terms of the food design and the food applications that you're generating, the understanding of the customers will be a chance to differentiate, right?
The first step is you usually give consumers what they know, so it's like a lower hurdle to actually buy into it, right? The next innovation phase is create something completely new that no one has seen before, has tasted it before, that creates so much excitement that you will create completely new markets.
So what's the next step for Formo?
Scaling up, increasing the team, going to a pilot plant right now, and then obviously starting with a regulatory process to get to market.
and then we will be able to eat your first cheeses when?
2023.
2023.
Some obviously will be lucky enough to taste it earlier, like you, Alec, obviously, with all of our taste tests.
Looking forward. Thank you so much, and all the best to you. Good luck to you and your wonderful
Thanks so much,
team. Let's rock the industry.
Let's do it.
Thank you, Raffael.
Thanks, Alec.